Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make a gradient on a drum carder from two colours. You'll end up with bats that shade gradually from one colour to the other. I'm doing it without any weighing or calculations. If you want to do the maths, that is completely fine. First thing you'll need to do is divide each of your colours into 10 equal-ish pieces. So I'm just doing a staple length each because it's easy. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10. So my first pile I want to make is going to be 4 of each colour. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 blue, and I'll put that off to one side. 1, 2, 3, 4 purple, and that's going to be the other end of my gradient. Now I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 purple and 1 blue. That goes next in my gradient. Then I will do 2 purple and 2 blue. And I should have left, yep, 3 blue and 1 purple. So that's a quite easy way to divide up, so you'll get an even blend without having to do any maths. The maths is quite simple though. Obviously you just weigh your total colour of each fibre and divide by 10. Make sure total of each is the same, or approximately. So my full 100% each colour chunks of fibre are actually fairly opened up. That's got a bit of junk in it. So I'm not going to bother carding them just on their own. They'll go through fine on the last pass. So what I'm going to do first is my 3 purple, 1 blue. I will take this blue and split it lengthways into 3. Does not have to be the same at all. It's just so rather than having 3 layers of purple and 1 of blue that will make a really noticeable line in it, I'm just splitting it up a little bit now so they'll go through the card with fewer passes. So I find the seam in this and open it out flat. Now these bats are going to be very small, so I don't want them to fill the whole width of the drum, because if they do they'll end up really thin and hard to manage. So I'm just putting it in about there. It can fill the middle third of the drum, and that is totally fine with me. Move that out of the way. Okay, so my first layer of purple. I'll put my blue up to go on the top. Now you could just put all your blue in one go and do an extra pass at the end. I think this way just gets it slightly more blended, slightly more quickly, and the less time I can need to spend on my feet, the better for me. There is purple number 2, blue number 2. Number 3, and blue number 3. Now my doffing tool is over here. You see, I've only filled the middle of the drum, which is fine. I'll still end up with quite a thin bat because this is a very small amount of fibre, so the last thing I want was this to be even smaller. Now I take my bats off by rolling them close to the teeth. That way if any odd fibres do get stuck in, I'm more likely to pick them up and grab them out. So this bat is not especially well blended. It's only been through one pass, and it's incredibly thin, which is great because it means I can put it straight through for the second pass. I don't have to worry about splitting it and spreading it down. This is more than fine enough to go through on its own. It's a bit tangly at the end because I didn't roll it up very neatly, but that will go through fine, I think. I held on to it a little bit too much, so I've got a bit on my liquor in, but the Strath stuff tends to come off the liquor in quite easily. If I pull that in, then yeah, it just peels off itself. Yay! Right, it's a bit more blended. I think I will put it through again though. That's a little bit too thin, so it is leaving more fibre behind than I wanted. So when I put this through again, I don't want it quite that wide. I'm going to split it in half lengthways and put the halves one each on top of each other. And that'll get me more blending because rather than having half of it there and half of it there, I'm going to have one half and the other on top of it. So more layers of colour. And again, I've got a tiny bit on my liquor in, but I'm just going to ignore that because it will come off while I put this one through. Now this is a homogeneous enough blend for me. It's got a few blue heathery parts in, but it's going to have one final pass anyway when I make it into the gradient. So to compare it to the purple, it is slightly bluer. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing with this pile that's half and half and this pile that's more blue. I will speed up the video because watching me do this is not going to be especially interesting. So I have my initial purple, my 75-25, my 50-50, my 25-75 and my blue. What I'm going to do now is carve them all together to make the gradient bat. What I would suggest you do if you are at all concerned, weigh them, make sure the weight is less than what will fit on your carder. If you don't know how much will fit on your carder, weigh a previous bat. If you've never made a bat before, this is a bit complicated to be your first, but you might want to err on the side of caution and split each pile in half. I'm reasonably sure this will all fit on mine, but I will need my packing brush, so I'm just going to locate that. This is what I use for a packing brush, just a bristle hair brush. So this bat's going to be bigger because it's going to have all of these colours in, so I want this to be essentially the full width of the drum. I'm not going to push it right to the edges so it falls off or anything, but I'm likewise not going to just keep it in the centre. Now, if you weighed your fibre, there was no need for you to break it into 4 separate bits for this part. You could just start with 40% of your whole. I was just doing this as a quick way to do it for people who are a bit scared of maths or just don't have a calculator in their craft room. Now, if your initial fibre was a little bit clumpy, then it's worthwhile recarding. Mine's fine, but I might take this bat off anyway, just to give a bit of symmetry and maybe a slightly easier feed. So and I have a tiny little bit of Silver Angelina. I'm going to put just the smallest amount of this between my layers. Now, I've got this gradient here. It's perfectly spinnable as it is, but you do have 5 discrete shades. What I'm going to do now is card them all into one bat, and you get a little bit more shading between the colours. The first thing I do is I take my first colour, spread it out right across the feed tray. So let's just go in the full width of the drum. And I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of this sparkle. Right, that's way too much. A tiny bit of this goes an incredibly long way. And this likes to sit at the top of the teeth, and because I want to make sure I can fit all of this on, I'm going to go over it with the packing brush. Alright, so that's all pressed in. Next is the next layer. It's much thicker than the previous ones, so I'm just opening up an inch or so at a time. Roll that back round and roll it off. That picked up some gunge that was in the teeth from before that I don't want. And here's my bat. It is blue on one side, purple on the other colours in between. But you can't see them. What I'm going to do is split this bat into thirds. So it doesn't have to be especially accurate. Okay, that's about right. Now, you can see the colour gradient a little bit more on the end. So what I want to do is open it up side to side. I'll do that with all my strips. It helps to have a table to work on rather than just trying to do it on the tray of the carder. Okay, that looks fairly good. And you can see here, because the fibres aren't perfectly straight, you can't really see the line between that layer, that layer, that layer, that layer and that layer. They're all sort of wobbling about a little bit. When you add the next 2 strips of bat on top, those the overlaps will be in different places, so you'll get even more of a gradient effect. And if you do want to micromanage, I can see that middle one, it's coming all the way down here. We don't want that coming all the way down here. We want that one going up there a little bit more. So you can move stuff around. They will try and follow the fibre in front of them onto the drum, but you can get them moved a little bit. So I've got a little bit more purple there and a little bit more blue there, but that's fine. So even though my top layer had quite a defined line there, you can see in my ends that's very blue. It's getting more and more purple all the way across. It's a fairly smooth gradient. And there we go, that's the finished bat. So don't want it to stick to itself, unroll it. So you've got a fairly good fade from the purple through to the blue. To spin this, I would tear thin strips off so I get bits of each colour. If I wanted to micromanage and I had a bit of blue or I didn't want it, I would just pull it out and spin it when I later came to that colour. But I like this more organic, natural effect. You don't have the harsh lines between each colour, so I don't mind if the gradient isn't perfectly smooth.